Can you hear me, Sam?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, let's make a start. So
hang on a sec, Rob.
Hang on, Rob.
Okay, you are now live streaming and can start the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome everybody to the Human Resources Management Development Committee, Wednesday the 21st of October 2020 via video conference. Sam, could you let us know if we've got any apologies, please, this morning?
Yes, Chair. I've received an apology from Councillor Mike Best this morning.
Thank you. And are we waiting for anybody else to come in?
We are waiting for Linda Vijay. I'm sure she will join us ASAP. I'll keep an eye on that one.
Thank you very much. So if we can then move on to item 2, which are minutes, pages 1 to 6 of the previous meeting held on the 5th of November 2019. Do any members have any arising from those minutes, and are you content that we pass those, please?
So moved.
No comment from me. Yeah, seconded.
Yeah, happy with that.
Thank you. So if we can now move on to item 3, which is items requiring urgent attention. I'm not aware of any. Are any members items this morning?
Chair, we don't have any urgent items.
Thank you, Sam. So therefore we'll move over to part 1, which is the open committee, which is item 4, which is the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Progress Report, pages 7 to 18. And I understand this is a report of the Director of Governance and Digital Services. Who is leading on this report today, please, Sam?
Chair, this will be Steve Pope and Chris Elliott, who are with us.
And are they going to screen share for this presentation?
No, it will be via the report, Chair.
Thank you very much. Would you both like to proceed, please?
Good morning, Chair. This is and everybody else. This is Chris Elliott, the Health and Safety Manager. I'll go through the health and safety aspects of the report and then hand over to Steve for the sickness absence. If I take you down through the report, then past the introduction into paragraph 2, proactive monitoring, the safety management audit system. So we've had a review of the NFCC audit. We employed a health and safety audit officer that came in for a 6-month contract, arrived 2 days before we went into lockdown, so has sort of made some inroads and really sort of worked really hard and tirelessly to try and push forward this audit whilst with a backdrop of COVID. So if you scroll on down through to the charts, you can see that we've moved it forwards and we now have 496 compliant areas, 140 working towards and 4 non-compliant, and that was, you know, really challenging to move it forward over that period, because the priority for the service was clearly our response to COVID and ensuring safe systems for our staff. So they've managed to move that area forward for us. If you were to add the sums up, you'll notice there's 8 more now on the chart there, and that's because we found 8 questions that hadn't been responded to. So we've now got those responses into the audit. We did focus a lot of it on the ISO 45001 question set, ones that matched across, just to help us if we do move to ISO 45001, we know that we've got those areas done already. So there's been some good progress there. There's still work to do, and we'll continue to progress that. The individual we employed as the temporary audit support officer for 6 months also looked at doing a gap analysis on ISO 45001 from where we are now with the NFCC audit methodology, moving across to 45001. The key takeouts of that, I mean, it was a really concise, a really sort of in-depth report that was written. It's a bit of a read, but from that, the cost or estimated cost would be about £35,000 to make that initial move to the audit model, and that's training staff to be auditors, verification visits from the sort of standard institute that would have to come in, and then beyond that, you're looking at about £12,000 a year annually to continue that audit model through. So That's quite a sizable difference between that and the NFCC, which comes at no cost other than my time and the time of my team to do the audit. So moving on from the NFCC audit side of life, some of the benefits I've listed there. The key benefit really is that our regional partners for the fire service, Cornwall, Avon, Dorset, Wiltshire, etc., are all either on this model or moving towards it. So at the moment, we can't benchmark regionally because we're on a completely different health and safety management system model. Some of the sort of financial benefit to it, we kind of have to realise that though it's costly to jump into this audit system, you won't see that immediately, any return on that. It takes time for safety events to reduce and things like that. So you will get the benefit, but it's just over a number of years, you then start to reap the rewards of this safety management system. And that's something that we have to bear in mind when we're looking at it and reviewing it. Any questions on that aspect there at all before I move on?
Not me at the moment. I have more questions later on. Sam, do we have any members that wish to come in at this point?
Chair, I haven't seen anything come through on the chat function, but members can just take the mute off to indicate if they'd like to speak, or use the chat function.
Thank you. So, yeah, if you'd like to continue, please.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So moving on to paragraph 2.5, workplace health and safety inspection assessments. This is where the stations annually do a health and safety inspection of their locations. And you can see on the chart there that there was a 45% that only that were overdue inspection. So quite a large chunk. We've already started work on that. We've run a report for the area manager for service delivery that's got a number of performance indicators to do with health and safety. This being one of them, and they're chasing that area. And I'm seeing these coming in now on our email system. So the work is happening, and they're reducing that down as we speak, which is really good. And I think COVID's maybe had a bit of a play on this one, where they've been directed and focused in other areas. It's just slipped, and we're picking that up now and getting that back into a much better position. So we are working on that one. If we move on down,
I think Councillor Thomas would like to come in on this section.
Yep.
Councillor Thomas, are you there, please?
David, you need to unmute if you'd like to speak. Can you hear us, David?
Sam, while we're waiting, if I may, I've got a question here. Clearly through the report, sorry, are you there, Councillor Thomas? Okay, I'll carry on. So the point I would like to raise on 2.5 is clearly you've got the negative performance at the moment, and we understand the reasons for that. But throughout this report, there's a heavy emphasis on the recovery phase. My question to you really would be, if I could put you on the spot, is I understand you're working towards now great compliance in this area. However, now that we're in the second wave of potentially COVID, what sort of provisional timeline are you working on to bring
shows the numbers of cases that we've had in the last 14 days in those cities.
Sorry, I was getting two people talking coming in at once. So there's somebody speaking over the top of you there, unfortunately. So I'm guessing the question you've asked is how we're going to continue to improve this area when we've got COVID potentially flicking back into response again.
That's right, yes.
So it depends how the service deals with flicking back into response. If we do it as in like regional hubs where the areas are, so for instance Exeter, if that was to spike, it's only the locations there that would go back into response, and the rest of the service could carry on, as it were, towards recovery and improve this area. It can still be done depending on the workload. So if a station is at their station, COVID or not, they can probably get on top of this now, because a lot of the early days was reacting to COVID. So there was an awful lot of work going on in the background, making locations COVID secure, new policies, procedures and things like that. All that's in place. So it's a lot easier to do other BAU now than it was the first time round. So I'm not sure it'll be too much of an impact going back into response to sort of improve this area. It might slightly in certain areas, but it won't be like it was clearly when we were reacting to that first wave.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's helpful. Sam, I've had something flash up to say that Councillor Thomas has left the meeting. Is he with us, or has he gone?
No, it doesn't look like he's with us, Chair, at the moment. But Ron Peart has indicated he'd like to speak, and so is Joe.
Okay, so if we can bring Councillor Peart in first, please.
Right, thank you, Chair. This is a legal policy requirement. Are the government going to give us any leeway on this? And I'd also like to know, in practice, how are these assessments done? Are they physically done on the appliances? How does it work? Thank you.
So the assessments that we call them RA9s in service, so a workplace assessment, is done by the station. A manager at the station has a form and they walk around and they do a health and safety management sort of audit of their location. So it's specific to the location, and it will ask questions about, is the compressor signed up properly? Does it have the sign to say that ear protection must be worn? Is the area clean? Are the fire inspections being followed? It's all that sort of stuff that they do locally as a station level. So yes, they've got that. Government leeway, there's only certain areas that they've put any extensions on things. So for instance, first aid at work has had an extension put on that for people requalifying because of the challenges of trying to requalify for first aid at work in a COVID environment. But for doing audits and inspections, they can be done under a safe system. As long as you put measures in place, they can be done. So I'm not aware of any extensions on that one.
Can I just have a follow-up on that? I can't understand then why we're in a negative situation.
It was capacity, because the teams are working so hard to get us in a position to be able to respond to COVID. There was a lot of work that was going on around the service to get the stations into a good position, and learning new ways of working with a COVID environment. So some of this would have just slipped slightly, and it's one of the areas that does slip when people are sort of have a lot on, and we pull it through. We work hard to keep them in a good place, but we were busy with COVID as well, so we did less pulling this time round, and we're getting on top of that now and pulling it through, and it's working. They are doing them.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Chris. Joe, I think you wanted to come in on some points of clarification.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, some really interesting questions, actually. So it probably helps for me just to set a bit of organisational context of where we were and then where we are now, because I think that might help frame some of your members' questions. So when we had the COVID response phase, obviously everyone was ordered to go home, and we of course had to keep our operational response. Through that, we had guidance through the National Fire Chiefs Council, which assisted us to follow essentially the regulations from an internal perspective around how we had to continue having safe systems of work. And as Chris is right, we didn't really have any allowances outside of that. What we had to do, therefore, is to really move a lot of our staff into that response phase. Chris did a great job with his team. I think they did over 120 risk assessments for us within that time to make sure that we were keeping our staff safe. But of course, that has an impact on some of our other areas. So some of those other areas that traditionally would have been part of Chris's job and some of our other officers' jobs, unfortunately, we had to pause because the risk was higher in some other areas around keeping our staff and communities safe. Thankfully, a lot of that work has now been done, and we can now, as Chris said, go back to picking up some of those other areas that we know we need to focus back on. A lot of the people on this call today, so certainly all of our HR teams and organisational development teams, were also seconded into the people cell to help with people impact assessments, various terms and conditions and pay things that needed to happen, again, to make sure that our staff were protected. And again, that's had an impact on some of our other work. We've moved out of the response phase as an organisation, and we started to move into recovery or renewal. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail when we get into the report around the people strategy. But it's really important, just so that members are aware, it's unlikely, unless there is a further UK lockdown, that we will need to go anywhere near moving the whole organisation back into a response phase. Because of the tier system that's been put into place, we're going to use that to help us understand or to mitigate or increase our levels of risk, and therefore what measures we put in place depending on the tiers of whichever town or city. So members would be aware that Exeter has had some issues around the university campuses. However, it's still in tier 1 at the moment. So although we have put some measures in place in Exeter, we haven't had to move back into where we were in the response phase. So I hope that helps members. We're having this week meetings daily around the response. I think every 2 weeks with a larger team, and our executive board are meeting weekly also to talk about and to make sure that we've got the right measures in place. I just wanted to add some reassurance and some context there, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Presumably, like you, I watched the messaging and the wording quite carefully, and at the moment, the message from the Prime Minister seems to be he wants to avoid a national lockdown if at all possible, but won't rule it out, which says to me it could potentially still be very much on the cards between now and Christmas, but also as well the possibility that we could have a circuit breaker for 2 or 3 weeks, if not longer. So I'm presuming you're factoring all that into your operational work.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Absolutely right. And we were actually the first service in the country to practice a full lockdown in a particular area, which we did about 2 months ago. We had all of our teams, we stood them up again, practiced what would happen, went through the procedures. That's also helped us to refine that. We've actually shared that with all other UK FRSs, and that's now being seen as best practice as well.
Thank you. That's helpful. Sam, do we have Councillor Thomas back? Because I'm conscious.
Yes, we do, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thomas, good to have you back. It's nice to see I'm not the only one having IT problems. Would you like to ask your points, please?
Thank you very much, Rob. And I apologise, I'm going to have to leave the video off. As soon as I tried to connect, it just disconnected me.
So working, I think. Don't press any more buttons.
No, very much so. Let me just go back to 2.5 if I can, and I apologise if this has already been asked. And it's basically the performance indicator and the target that we've got there at 0%. I just didn't understand a 0% target. Is that basically saying that we will complete everything? So it's like 100%, or is it we haven't got a target set? And if it is we haven't got one, should we be setting one?
Okay, so the performance measure is about assessments, the percentage of how many haven't been done. So the target is that we want 0 in the fact that they've all been done, and that should be achievable for this particular audit, because it is a workplace audit where the stations go out individually and assess that. So that should be easily achievable and managed. And as we've said earlier, you might have missed it, but COVID's played quite a big part in the reason why we're where we are.
Okay, I understand that. In my simple logistics, I would have expected that target to be 100%. In other words, for them all to be complete. But I understand if members think I'm being pedantic, that's all. So,
I mean, I could certainly adjust the way that this report reads, in that I put the performance as percentage completed rather than percentage not complete. And then the target would be 100%. And that's an easy one to do for the next report, if that's preferable for the members.
See what other members think, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Chris, did you want to, if there's no questions at this point, did you want to carry on taking us through the report, please?
Certainly. So moving on to reactive monitoring then, paragraph sort of 3.2 really. and the chart. So this is the RIDDOR side. And you can see in the chart, if you look at the right-hand side of the chart, the RIDDOR reports have really dropped down. And again, it's linked back to COVID and the impact of that. So if you look at the over 7-day injuries, it's right down. So we've not been having, the number of incidents. The public haven't been out as much because of lockdowns, so there's not been as much for us to go out. Training was reduced, so our staff haven't been getting, the opportunities to be injured, as it were. So the 7-day injuries have reduced. But what is notable is the dangerous occurrences have crept up, and it's mainly BA. So we've got a relatively new BA set out there in service, but also some of the processes that we're used to have changed slightly because of COVID. So the BA user group and the investigator that's looking at some of these are kind of analysing that area to see if some of the controls we put in because of COVID are impacting BA events becoming RIDDOR reportable. Now, I'll give you a for instance. So they clean the BA at the end of a day or end of a use, but there's a check they don't do until they reuse it the next time. And that's because if they did that check, I put it back on to check it's working properly, they potentially would have to clean it again. And you'd end up in this cycle of constantly cleaning your BA. So it's done before they do the next wear. If that's done before they go into an irrespirable atmosphere and it doesn't work, suddenly it's a RIDDOR reportable event. So it changes the criteria for the event. Whereas if it was done back at the station, it's not RIDDOR reportable because it's not going into an irrespirable atmosphere. You see, so that's where some of this might be coming out of, and that's what we're looking at to get to the bottom of that, because it might mean we have to change the process slightly. So that the RIDDOR it's the best I've ever seen it, and I do believe that COVID's got some sort of play on that that's kept it down, but it's one that we'll monitor moving forwards. If I take you on through to personal injuries, that's paragraph 3.3. And the chart, you can see the trend line there showing that we've got a really nice downward trend reduction in personal injuries, which is ideal. And then if you look at March, you can see it drops away, and that's the lockdown kicking in, where we've not had the incident rates going out and things like that. And then in June, July, we started training again. The country was going back out and about, and it pops back up again. So it kind of links to the nature of our work activities, and it shows, but the actual incidence, it's low. We're doing really well with our injuries. We'd obviously like it to be zero, but for the volume of work activity and training activities we are really low with this. And there's a lot of work going on with the musculoskeletal group to try and get that down, manual handling training. So there are efforts across the wider service to bring down our injury rates.
And they compare favourably, do they, to our neighbouring authorities? With other fire and rescue services, they do, yes, because we're one of the biggest, and our rates are really low in comparison. So we're doing really well, and we should champion that. Good, thank you.
So moving on down to vehicle incidents, these are generally our biggest safety events.
Chris, sorry, and Rob, I think Councillor Peart wanted to get in to ask a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Of course, I didn't see it on the chat line, Steve. Maybe I missed it.
No, I didn't put it on, Chair. I just wanted a quick question regarding the breathing apparatus. Is the problem solely cleaning the apparatus? It works fine apart from that. Is that what you're saying?
So part of the process, when you go through your cleaning process, at the end of it, you should do a check. But part of the check isn't being done until you do your first wear the next time, because of if you did your check, you'd have to clean it again because of COVID impact. You don't want to put it on your face and that sort of thing when breathing in it. So when they do it before a wear, if it's before a hot wear in a fire situation, that now becomes RIDDOR reportable. So if it fails then, whereas if it had failed after a clean, you pick it up and it's not RIDDOR reportable. So, oh, I haven't done something right, and you just quickly rectify it because it's done as part of a maintenance, and it comes under sort of the guidelines and guidance from the HSE about what you do and don't report for BA type incidents.
Right. So how are you overcoming this?
Well, this is what the BA user group are looking at, and it will come out in the investigation to one of the wares that's come through as a RIDDOR. To look at whether the process we've put in place for our cleaning needs to be adjusted accordingly and how we do that. But it's a challenge because of as soon as you wear it again, you've got to clean it again. So it's that COVID aspect that's making it a bit of a challenge.
So I just picked up Joe's answer as well, which he's fine by me. Thank you for that explanation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, would you like to carry on, please?
Yep. So I was going on to the vehicle incidents. So vehicle incidents, if you look across all of our safety events, are generally the greater proportion of our safety events. However, that's because we do an awful lot of driving as a service and we go out an awful lot. If you then looked at it as a proportion of our movements, it's a really low number. Really, really is quite low. It's something like for every 290 odd mobilisations result in a safety event. So we're doing okay there. And you can see the trend line, it's dropped down. And again, in March, when we go into lockdown and there's no movement, you can see on the chart that it drops right down. And as the country starts to move back into going out and about, it peaks back up again and has dropped back down again more recently. But there's a lot of work going on. We do psychometric testing for at-risk drivers. So someone who's identified as being a potentially a risk driver for us, we do a bit of psychometric testing. Depending on the results of that, we will do engagement with driver training, so some coaching and mentoring to bring that driver along. And in the extreme cases, we might request that a driver is removed from driving, obviously conscious of the impact that has on response. But there's the overall safety of us and the public that we have to look at. So there's a lot that the team are doing. In fact, later on this afternoon, I'm doing a risk review of at-risk drivers. So there's a committee of us that get together and we go through them to look at how we can improve the drivers. And that's working really well. The groups have also done some reversing training, banking training, because that's our slow speed maneuver is the primary vehicle incident type that we have. We don't really tend to hit things or have issues when we're driving to and from incidents. It's the slow speed stuff of trying to navigate our narrow lanes and our streets with parked cars that tends to be the challenges.
Thank you, Chris. What's your analysis for the medium to longer term as our sort of vehicle stock changes, possibly to some smaller vehicles, perhaps more advanced vehicles with more technology? What is the sort of longer term trend on these areas, do you think?
So an area that we're watching with interest as we speak is the introduction of the rapid intervention vehicles, the RIVs, because if they're at stations where we've seen a lot of minor vehicle collisions because of the nature of the roads that they've got, the topography of their environment that they're operating in, the RIV is going to be more manoeuvrable down some of these country and more rural locations. So we're watching it to see if it starts to drop off, and it was the same with the LRP as well. So it's one to watch, but it's with caution, because what an RIV, if it can get through the lanes more easily, it might go through the lanes more faster. So there's another aspect to it as well. We might see a slightly different type of vehicle incident, maybe more significant. And that's something I've already raised with driver training, and they're highlighting that as part of the training package.
Thank you for that.
Chair,
I understand, Chair, that
sorry,
you would like...
Sorry, could I just interject at that point and just ask people, if we're going to be referring to vehicles, could we use the full term and not the acronym? So rapid intervention vehicle or light response vehicle instead of the acronym, please, because the public will be listening.
Thank you, Sam. Duly corrected. Chair, I think you would like to come in with a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. It was round the Driving for Better Business initiative, and I just wanted to know whether we're bringing that out across to all staff, because it's about keeping everybody safe when driving on the roads, to make sure that the standards improve so there are less vehicle accidents, because road safety is one of our primary prevention areas.
There is work looking at bringing that into the service, and driver training. We're doing a lot of research into that with risk and insurance. I can't answer how far we've got with that because of where COVID's impact. So I would imagine that a lot of the work for that has been paused whilst we deal with COVID, and then it will recommence. They did do the risk assessment comes with Driving for Better Business to review the organisation to see where we scored on it, and then that gives you areas that you then need to look at to do work. And one of the areas is about our non-blue light drivers, so your sort of support staff. A lot of us come in, we do a driver assessment, but then we never get reassessed down the line. So fleet and driver training are looking at that area and what impacts there would be to bring that in and do more frequent refreshers for that part of the business, which is all linked to the Driving for Better Business initiative.
Thank you. Does that cover your point, Sarah?
Definitely. Thank you very much. It was just making sure that we were covering everybody.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to move on to health, safety and welfare actions, please?
I can see Ron's got his hand up.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you. I've just got a question regarding, do you have any figures, claims made against the fire authority to prove that this is obviously doing a better job by training the drivers? Because we must have had instances where we've had accidents. Chris?
So from the claims side of life, I'd have to go to risk and insurance to get that detail to see whether our claims are coming down. But we can, the issue they have, I guess it's how you measure it, because you can measure it by number of claims or the cost of the claims, because you could have one claim that's extremely huge and that would, so it's how we do that measure. But I can certainly go for the next meeting and get that detail into you. But I have to go to risk and insurance for the claims aspect. But the vehicle rates and the incidents that we're seeing from a safety event perspective are dropping down. So we can see that. But what I need to see, and I need to be able to analyse it by stations and locations, in the sense of Porlock or a station that's got the new rapid intervention vehicle, what their incident rate was before they had that type of vehicle, and compare it with now they've got the type of vehicle, depending where they go.
But thank you for that, because it'd just be useful to know the comparisons.
Yep, definitely. And it's an area I'm going to start looking at once I know where they're going and where we're going to put the rapid intervention vehicles.
Thank you for that, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. I mean, again, this is the sort of direction I wanted to take the committee in, which is much more sort of probing and asking for more information and sort of developing the members' understanding of this area of work. So if any other members want to suggest any other items for future meetings like this is precisely the sort of way I wanted us to go, rather than just sort of approving things. I think this much more sort of questioning approach is very helpful. So thank you, Ron, for that. If there's no other questions on this section, Chris, could you do item 4, please?
Certainly. So item 4 then, we've got the safety event reporting tool that's being developed. It's going to be called the Safety Event Management System, because it's going to be a full management system of safety events. So from reporting it, through investigating it, through managing the actions that come out of it. Work was paused because the developers were moved on to doing COVID works and developing systems to help support our COVID response. They went back on to doing the system for us as of August. So that's kicked off back again, and we're trying to support that whilst doing COVID response and BAU, but that's moving forwards. I've put in here that a system will be released later in 2020, having had a meeting just last week. I'm not sure if it will be this year or will slip into next year. It's about capacity and our response to COVID at the same time. So but it is moving forward, which is really positive. And I like what I'm seeing, what they're developing. It looks really good. And that will be able to give us more figures. So part of that is the reporting function. I need the intelligence out of that system to be able to feed it back to the committee to give you the information when you ask me the questions. And that system is really going to help support that.
Thank you, Chris. Did you want to take us through some of the data that we've got today, please?
Have you moved on to the sickness? I was just going to finish this piece here, and then I'll hand it over to Steve to do the sickness absence side. And it was just to highlight that, the last 6 months, the health and safety team have been massively involved with the support to COVID for the service. We've managed to carry on with a lot of our BAU at the same time. It's been challenging. It's been, varied, rewarding. A lot of it's been time sensitive, especially in the early days when we were reacting. But it's, as Joe said earlier, there's been over 120 risk assessments now. We've had a few more come in just recently that the team have helped support, work on, that have been produced that are solely specific to how we deal with COVID. We've helped support getting our facilities COVID secure as we must. And we're still doing that now. We're developing a COVID secure audit or assurance audit that we can roll out. And my intent with that is it's not going to be my team that just do that. It's going to be available to all staff. So if anybody's unsure of their location, they can grab the assurance audit and do it themselves, so that they can go and ensure their location, and the rep bodies as well. So they'll have that ability to grab it, and managers. So it'll prove to be a really useful document. That's my intent. So that's on sort of the COVID side of life. And moving forward, we employed a new health and safety officer in March. Again, she joined. 2 days later, we went into lockdown. So she's learnt the service remotely, but it's helped us with a lot of our guidance documents for COVID, written a lot of the risk assessments for COVID. So has really had to get in there running and join the team. But the intent is that each health and safety officer will support 2 groups each, and that gets health and safety support directly into 2 groups, which I'm hoping will help to improve the culture. And when we talked about the workplace inspections earlier, it will help keep them 100% complete, rather than as we saw just now, 45% past review date. So that's where we're going with the health and safety culture, moving it forwards and enhancing my team to support that approach. But that ends my part of the report, and I'll hand over to Steve unless there's any questions.
Have we got any more questions for Chris at this moment? Doesn't look like it. Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for the update, and thank you to you and your team for what you're doing. I'm sorry these days it seems to be always asking officers to get their crystal balls out and read the smoke or whatever, because we don't really know where we're going. But obviously today you've assured us very much that you're planning for all eventualities, which is important. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if we can now move on to the next section, please.
Yeah, Steve Pope, if I can come in, please, Chair. And just also a thank you to Chris for that excellent input on the health, safety and well-being. The overall paper sits within the people strategy as one of our strategic themes, and obviously we're going to go on to the people strategy update shortly. But the next section is around our absence reporting, and through previous meetings we've agreed to report it in this way and more by exception, rather than going down into the detailed aspect of looking at individual contract types and where we are in each of those. So from a by exception basis, our target for whole time control staff and support staff has been an average of 8 days of absence per person per year. And you can see from the charts on page 15 that we are well below that target. In fact, we're 23.2% below what we would expect to be at this time of this year. Obviously, it has been an exceptional year with COVID, and it has meant that we've been working in a different way, which may have improved those figures for us. We certainly haven't seen a lot of cases of COVID within the service, but we've done an awful lot to support staff and protect them in how they work for the service. So I think that's probably reflected in those figures. So 23.2% better than target. Also, just for reference, 17% below the same time last year.
Steve, can I just ask you about those variances? It's good to see that reduction, but it seems a bit counterintuitive. On the one hand, collectively as a country, obviously with COVID, for example, mental health issues are to the fore. I think the whole country's a bit worn out and sort of depressed, sort of staggering through the pandemic. But on the other hand, in those issues in terms of workforce and sickness, perhaps people have been at home, you've had a better work-life balance. What's your sort of analysis of that? Because it does seem a bit counterintuitive.
So when we look at our different staff categories, our support staff have been able to, in general, work from home and as guided by the government. But if we just think about our whole time stations and control, they have needed to be in the workplace, which we've made COVID-19 secure. So they have been there. We have operated with a rota system during the lockdown period so that we only had the required number of firefighters on station at any one time, and we rotated other staff off. So that may have assisted people in their general lives. Certainly the working from home as well would have helped people. And as you point out, there is the aspect of it being potentially isolating working from home as well. And we've mentioned it in the next paper, but we've done a lot of work on workplace return assessments and health and well-being discussions with our staff, where we've considered things like their family circumstances, their COVID age, which gives an indication of their vulnerability in terms of COVID and what effect it may have on them. I think the mental health bit is starting to emerge now, and it's something we need to be mindful for as we move forward. One of the things that we have done with the latest government advice, which was to work from home if you could do so effectively, by having those discussions with our staff, we've actually identified that in quite a number of cases, people can be more effective if they have a blended or hybrid method of working. And therefore, we have enabled people to come into the workplace where they will benefit from doing so, provided they work in a COVID secure way. And we've done a lot of work around, as Chris alluded to, around the service to make sure it is a safe place. So it's one that we need to watch with that mental health and the aspect of isolation. But we will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Just moving on, we then go on to the on-call rates, which we've been providing data on for the last 3 years. But one of the things that was referenced in the minutes, and we said we would do, is to set ourselves a target for the on-call. And when we look back at the last 3 years, we've concluded with our business analysts that we would want to recommend a target of 12 days per person per year. And the reason this would be higher than the other staff categories is because the measure is over a 7-day week, whereas the other staff categories, for example, whole time, they have 4 days on, 4 days off. And for support staff, obviously they typically the full-time work Monday to Friday. So when you pro rata that up, 12 days seems to be an appropriate figure. So that's our proposal around that. Our analysts are saying, look, we should review that on an ongoing basis and potentially after 6 months. So this is one of the decision points from this paper that we're asking members to indicate if they would agree to that target being set. And then in future, what we will be able to do is to report in comparison to that target rather than the previous year's sickness figures.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, at this point, I'm quite happy to move that from the chair. If I've got a seconder, please.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you.
That's David Thomas seconded.
Thank you. I don't know, Sam, if you want us to vote at the end of the meeting or what now that this business is in front of us on this item.
Chair, I think since you're still considering the item, I can keep in store that you've moved and we have a seconder and take the vote at the end of the item.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I just wanted to get that on the table so it's there. Would you like to carry on, please?
Yeah, so just going really back to COVID, and we've said in paragraph 5.7 we had access to antigen testing early on in COVID in April. So we've had that extra ability to ensure that any staff with symptoms were able to be tested. Obviously, that's now open to the general public through the test and trace system. But just really that update in terms of the service, we've had 93 staff who have been tested, of which 12 have tested positive, which when you consider a workforce of 2,000, I think is a very good figure to see. And it's fortunate that we are in a relatively low rate of COVID in terms of the overall country. So whilst we have the method to test people, we haven't found that we've had a lot of people actually catching COVID, which is really pleasing.
And again, Steve, I'm aware, obviously, that when testing facilities are put into place, we're involved with that. But what you're really, I mean, if we do, as we seem to be, unfortunately, getting back into a trajectory of more infections and heading in the wrong direction, so are you reasonably confident that our staff won't have the same problems that other sectors have had, such as schools and education, in terms of accessing those tests?
So we know nationally there was a problem a couple of weeks ago, and we were experiencing some of that firsthand, where people who were due to be tested were being told they would need to go to another part of the country to actually receive that test. That problem seems to be resolved, and it's possible now to get the test done locally. We are looking at whether we will have a private supplier should we need to, if we cannot at any time access the national arrangements. And we've been making inquiries through Halo, which is linked to Exeter University, to see if we can actually do that. But our preference would be to use the nationally provided system wherever we possibly can.
Thank you. Is this a problem being caused because large parts of the country in the north are, currently in a worse state than we are? So are resources being triaged up there, or is it another reason why we're in that position, or we're in that position?
From what I understand, there was some problems actually with the test and trace system a couple of weeks ago. And also with the amount of testing being done as children have gone back to schools, I think there was a supply issue as well. And we all are seeing that reported through the national news. But I think at this moment in time, things are back to normal.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Councillor Wheeler, I think you'd like to come in, please.
Yes, please, Chair. Can I go back to the on-call firefighters sickness recording? How will pay for availability affect these calculations, please?
So the pay for availability, we have commenced now at 6 stations from the beginning of October. It is our intent to expand that across the service, but in terms of the calculations around sickness levels and sick pay, it's the same principles that we would use under what I would call the pay-as-you-go system, where they have a retaining fee and commit to so many hours a week. What we typically do for on-call is we classify on a daily basis. So if you were sick for a week, it'd be 7 days. And that would be the same whether you were on pay for availability or on the current existing scheme.
Okay, but the hours that they will be available for will be much less under pay for availability, but they'll be more certain. Won't that affect the calculation?
Yeah, so the hours that they will be able to give will be between 30 and 120. So we will see possibly some variations in what we have now. The aspect, and I think this is what you're suggesting, can we match up exactly what are the days which they normally would be working instead of using the 7-day calculation?
Yes.
That's the point you're making.
That's right, that's right.
and it's something that I would need to check with some of my colleagues, because the overall system we're using at the moment to make payments is an interim system, and what we do want to do is to work with our availability system provider to actually enable pay for availability to work more simply using that system. And it's something that I would need to check on how that will work in terms of the recording of sickness under that new system. And just sort of associated with this, one of our objectives is to move to a system where annual leave is booked by the hour rather than by the day. And if you take that same analogy back to sickness, it would suggest that to be able to identify number of hours that should have been available, but were due to sickness as well. So you can see that kind of link.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Would you like to carry on if we've got no more questions at this point?
I think that really concludes the report, and I know we've talked about the targets. I would just want to make sure that we've got that covered as a full vote from members.
Thank you. So on that note, I've proposed that we accept these changes. It's been seconded by Councillor Thomas. So Sam, how do you want us to vote? By putting our hands up physically, or?
If everybody could put their video on, we've got a proposer and a seconder. If we could put videos on and move to the vote by a show of hands, that would be great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can confirm that that's been carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I had a choice to put our hands up rather than use the hand function. Thank you, Steve, for that. Do you have anything further to add, please?
No, I haven't, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to hear those points and for your feedback.
Thank you again, and thank you to your team for again trying to keep things on and steady footing through these. We do appreciate it. It's very difficult at the moment. Don't have any more issues around the testing regime, and let's hope that can be stabilised. Thank you, members. So if we can now move on to 5, which is the People Strategy update, please. And Joe, are you leading on this one?
Yes, Chair, I'll introduce it. And I've got some subject matter experts, if you're happy, that will go into the detail or answer any technical questions, if that's okay.
Thank you. I think we'll take the same approach, just sort of maybe with an introduction and then go through it sort of broadly section by section. That will give members a chance to come in if they want to. And also, can you clarify, is a vote needed on this report, please?
No, a vote isn't needed on this report. It's for noting, Chair, other than that we'd like to update on this at each HRMD meeting.
Thank you. So if you'd like to proceed, please.
Thanks. Some members will be aware that the People Strategy was devised using many workshops through our OD team across a huge sector of our organisation, and our People Strategy was devised in 2019, where it came to HRMD to have that presented on. That People Strategy is now in place, and there's many areas of that have been implemented. It's broken into 5 key areas: leadership, inclusion, ways of working, learning and development, and health, safety and wellbeing. Now, of course, there have been some impacts on the implementation plan on this around COVID, but while there have been impacts and some areas around development have been difficult to achieve, actually some other areas there's been an opportunity to accelerate. So certainly when we get to the ways of working, you'll see that some of those things around more flexible working, working from home, changing core hours, actually we've managed to do. In fact, it's helped us manage our response around COVID. So what I'd like to do is bring in some others who have been working on this, throughout our pandemic and also in the people section. So if I can bring in Michelle Smithen to start talking about leadership, that would be great, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Sobey, actually. I'm Head of Organisational Development. So I think what we propose to do, because there's myself, Audrey Gilding and Steve Pope, who this is a very collaborative piece of work, as you can understand the people strategy, we're each going to talk about various bits throughout the themes, if that's okay. Obviously, there's an awful lot in here, so we've picked out
Michelle, we've lost your sound. Michelle, we've lost your sound.
Our talent management and the way that our leaders are developed, because it's been fairly piecemeal, I think, in the past, and getting a framework together where we can make sure that our leaders are developed even before they go into role has been one of the key drivers for this. So what we've done is developed an approach which is a talent pool framework, and that's developed and will be available for every level in the organisation, where operational and non-operational people who enter a talent pool will be developed together around their leadership and management skills. That means that when roles come up and roles are available, people are already pretty well developed to go into those roles, and it will help to reduce the number of temporary posts that we have. But that's always, as it says in the report, allowing for flexibility and organisational need where we might need to do that. There are already some people on these cohorts, so the learning on offer is offered in a blended approach, and you can imagine through COVID it's been quite difficult to do the traditional, in fact it's impossible to get people together to do what we normally do around a workshop style of learning. So we've had to develop a more blended approach, and that's helped us, I think, to be a bit more resilient going forward into the future. As you were talking about, if we went back into a more of a response phase, we've got a more resilient approach now to that learning and development. The other highlight really around leadership is that members may remember that a task and finish group was set up to look into empowerment and decision making following the cultural audit last year to see how staff felt around that area. And the task and finish group did a lot of engagement and developed a decision making model that just helps to make sure that people are considering who needs to be making that decision that they're talking about. Have they got all the information required? Have they got everyone around the table? So it's supporting inclusion and making sure that people who need to be included in decision making are there around the table, and it's fully scalable. You can use it on a big, weighty, complex decision or on a small decision, but it helps to make sure that those values are embedded throughout that. One of the opportunities that COVID has presented is a greater use of virtual working, and obviously that's been quite difficult at some times, and some things have been impossible to do. But what we have done is leadership have been calling into watchers on a regular basis virtually, and the feedback from that has been really great. Actually, they've really enjoyed that regular kind of contact, because it's been easier, obviously, than driving lots of leaders all over the place. It's been easy to kind of call in and just have a very informal 30-minute chat with watchers. I've really appreciated that. So that's helping with that aspiration and having more visible leadership and better communication from our leaders. So at the moment, that's around the leadership and management kind of development stuff. Audrey Gilding is going to talk to you about some of the inclusion work that's been happening, and then I'll come back later to talk about a psychological safety intervention that we're putting together, which we've alluded to at the end of the report, but has moved on since this report was developed.
Can I just ask you, you've touched on the issue of empowerment. How do you overcome the sort of structural barriers within a uniform service to facilitate empowerment? It's not always, in my experience, easy to do it in the private or the public sector in a normal, but an sort of highly structured environment. So how are you you working to overcome that?
Yeah, so partly that decision model will help because it does help to set out the values and who needs to be there, and is a piece of reflection for leaders to make sure that is it a decision for them to make, or should they be pushing that decision making further down? The biggest piece of work that we'll be doing is cultural. So that's, as I was just talking about, the intervention piece around psychological safety, which is where people feel safe to learn, to contribute, and to challenge in the work environment. And that is regardless of the hierarchy. So there's an awful lot of work that we're putting together now, and it's built on lots of work from civil aviation. So a just culture, making sure that people, although there is a hierarchy, that people are safe to do that, because that's how you develop a safe culture and an engaged culture. And that sits across challenging behaviours as well. So any kind of inappropriate behaviours, if we feel safe to challenge those, we feel safe to speak up where we think something isn't safe, that's a cultural condition that sits across that. So that's the piece of work that I was going to talk to you about at the end, which is really exciting, actually, something that will really kind of build a same culture, an engaged safety culture.
Thank you. Sorry for bringing it forward a bit. Well, obviously you'll come back to that again later on.
Yeah, not a problem. I think that's the issue with this, with the strategy, and we will be reviewing the strategy, obviously, but themes, all those themes are so interlinked, it's very difficult to separate actually one thing from another.
Yes, thank you. Sam, have we got any members who'd like to come in at this point?
Chair, I haven't seen any hands raised, or there's nothing on chat at the moment.
Okay. I think the chair mentioned Molly's principles. I don't know whether you want to elucidate on that, Chair, do you?
It's just, yeah, I'm coming in. The broadband is not good here in Wimpole this morning rather. Absolutely really pleased to hear this attitude, this very open approach that we're looking about trying to change the culture. And I just bring members back to that tragic situation we had in Plymouth. And I think we, as an authority and as an organisation, agreed to Molly's principles, which was exactly that. In the call, in our command control unit, it was about calling something out if we didn't think it was safe. It is called Molly's principles, isn't it?
Chair, it is called Molly's principles. I think Joe can probably help with that.
Chair, yes, this was an incident in our control room that happened where tragically there was a fatality, and when after the review it was tracked back that there were some members of control that didn't feel they could speak up at the time. So those principles have been adopted in our control room, specifically in our control room, but actually this is very, very similar. This is about people being able to speak up, not just about safety events. So it's certainly around health and safety and making sure people can speak up when they see something wrong there, but also around cultural elements, around if they see or hear behaviours that they don't like, that they feel they can raise it and that it's a safe place to do so. And Michelle will be able to give you a lot more detail on that, Chair, if that's okay when we get to the end.
Thank you, Joe.
So Audrey is going to...
Could we move?
I think, Rob, are you still there?
Still here. I think we had a bit of a blip there.
Yeah, okay.
We're all doing... Must be the weather.
Yeah.
Would you like to come in now, please, and present your section?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to talk a little bit about the report and some highlights in it. So I would like to first take you to paragraph 3.5, and this is the annual recruitment and diversity report. This is all reporting from before the pandemic, so the figures that we will present next year will probably look a little bit different, but some really great achievements I think we made in 2019. So we had the biggest number of female on-call new starters ever in our 25 years of having women in the service. So 21 new ladies started with us, together with 3 more whole-time staff. So we have now got over 100 women which is a great achievement. So that means that the female representation in our operational staff has gone up by 1%. So not only that, but attraction rate in the support vacancies has also gone up. So that was a good result. Just the female application percentage for the on-call is about 14%, so that's about twice as high as the year before. And at the moment, we are still maintaining that sort of percentage in 2020, so that's really good. The number of applicants with a different ethnic background on average are close to reflecting our community. So our community is about 5.3% and the ethnic minority, but support exceeds that with 6.2%. So, and the real interesting fact was that even in our whole time applicants, so that was only internal candidates, was at 5.5%, so really, really good. On our LGBT, the application rates were much, much higher than in our community, which is good to see, which made that at the end of the year, our workforce had a percentage of 2.4% LGBT staff, which is higher than in the community, at least when we compare that to the data from the 2011 survey. So in the support group, the percentage of staff gaining a promotion was 17%, which is also really good. And the female representation in the senior management group went up, although since that time an area manager has left, so we'll have to see what kind of impact that has on next year's figures. Another highlight of this year has been the TIDE assessment, which is the Talent, Inclusion and Diversity Evaluation. It's an external assessment which we do with the Employers Network for Equality and Inclusion. So we joined this network in 2019. We did an assessment, we got a bronze award, and this year we did the assessment again, and we were actually, so we had improved so much on areas like strategy, leadership, recruitment training, communication and procurement, that we got a silver award, which is an amazing achievement because 98 organisations worldwide did the assessment, including 4 fire rescue services in the UK, and we achieved 29th overall, so really, really good. Then I would like to take you to paragraph 3.13, where we, you might remember that I mentioned a collaboration with Devon and Cornwall Constabulary, Dorset Police and Devon County Council on a sponsorship programme for women in middle management positions. So because of COVID, this got a little bit of delay, but on the 30th of September, the programme kicked off with an event across the organisations, and this is an initiative for 12 months. So we still have some time to go. Then I'd like to take you to 3.14. We have, despite the lockdown, despite the fact that it was difficult to get people to stations, we contributed to the NHS video for Virtual Pride. So somebody from the NHS came to our Taunton station to do that. We also did some work in a national collaboration with Cheshire Fire and Rescue Service in relation to the Gypsy and Traveller Equal Access to Services, which has gone to the National Fire Chiefs Association, which then we will go out for consultation nationwide. So those are the main things from my report. Do you have any questions around it?
Thank you very much. I think this is, in my opinion, an extremely positive report. It outlines a lot of good work that's been going on. I'd like to thank you as well, because I think before we haven't had some of the detail that you've provided, to the committee in terms of the actual work. And I think again the challenge I would put to us and the comms department and particularly to you, Sarah, as chair, is I just think we need to be publicising so much more of this good work, because I think it's chicken and egg. The more that we tell people we're reaching out to women, all different parts of the community, and generally trying to be more inclusive, I think the more it helps with actually fulfilling those targets. And particularly looking at this report, the good steady progress that's been made in regard to women within the service. And I think the important point that you've made, Audrey, that the BAME representation is now coalescing around what our communities actually look like is incredibly important, because I think that was a concern that, you know, Devon and Somerset, you know, is becoming much more diverse, particularly in the towns and the cities, and we strongly want our fire service to look like the people in the communities we're serving. The one challenge I have for you though, Audrey, is of course we know that we're always working to census data that's always can be quite out of date. So and I know that's what you're working to, but I think, you know, I've got every confidence, certainly from an Exeter point of view, that when the next census comes out, you know, the diversity will have increased again. We'll have much more BAME people in the community. So we'll have another target to work towards. But I do want to put it on record. This is an excellent report, and good progress is being made, and I think that's really important, especially during the difficult period of COVID as well, where you can't actually get out, as you've said in the report, and interact with people in the community at open days and events. So I think the work is even more impressive because it's been done often remotely. So thank you for that, and of course all the awards and commendations that we've received. Sam, I think would the chair or another member wanted to come in at this point?
Chair Ron Pitt would like to come in.
Thank you. Should we take Councillor Pitt first, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question regarding the brilliant recruitment of female members of the public. Is there a reason? Do we know the reason why we've got more people coming forward? Is it that we're getting the message out there better? If you could just expand on that.
Yes, certainly. We definitely doing a lot of engagement on career fairs and open days. We've had one of our stations do a specific female have a go event that actually got 3 women to apply, which was amazing to see. And they use specific Facebook and Twitter messages to get people more interested. What we also do is something which we call a positive action evening, where we invite women to have a go at our practical tests so that they can kind of see where they are with their fitness levels. And that is really important because for many women, we see that if they go to a practical test and fail the practical test, that they are so disheartened that they don't retake the test like they can do, but they drop out of the process. So by letting them have a go at some of our practical tests, they can see where they are with their fitness level, and then possibly postpone their practical assessment until they really feel ready for it. So that means they have higher rates of passing the first time round in their tests, and that keeps them in the process as well.
Thank you for that. So it's a more flexible approach.
Yes, certainly.
I do have another question, Chair.
Yes, of course.
It's on 3.11 regarding the on-call to whole time process. Is this just for females?
No, this is for all of our on-call staff. So we have recognised that our on-call staff have an awful lot of knowledge and experience, and we wanted to give them a go at transferring to our whole-time service.
Yeah, the question I really want to ask on this is, because we're over 80% reliant on on-call, to move them to all time, is this a strategy to get away from on-call use What's the reasoning behind it?
Okay, I might have to ask Steve Pope to answer that for me.
Yeah, I can certainly. Sorry. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm just coming back in as well. The on-call to hold time process is to enable our internal staff to apply for hold time vacancies. And this is intended to be a separate approach, a separate stream to members of the public who can apply for hold time positions. Now, as Audrey has said, it reflects the quality of the staff that we have within the service. But the other thing is we've had a period when we've had on-call staff working temporarily on fixed-term contracts as well within the whole time. And when we commenced that process, it was a very rapid deployment, and we recognised that we would need to go through a more thorough process. And that's what we're doing at the moment. And we've had between 280 and 300 applicants from the on-call, which have been able to participate through that process. And at the moment, we're at the interview stage. Now, I want to come directly back to your question, because there isn't an intent here to remove staff from on-call. If they join us as a whole-time person, it is still possible for them to continue to do their on-call contract as well, but they need to do it normally with reduced hours so that their total number of availability and working hours aren't excessive. And obviously, going back to that pay for availability, that will again give greater flexibility. So when we've appointed from on-call to whole time, we are likely to also have some further vacancies that we will need to go back and fill in the on-call. But it does give recognition that if you join the on-call, it is a potential route into whole time as well, which will help our attraction rates for the service within the on-call. So there's a lot of positives from this, and we're really looking forward to making those appointments.
Yeah, and could I, through you, Chair, just a follow-up question to Stephen. The rate of on-call firefighters who still leave the service, would this help to address that for more opportunities?
I believe so, but as yet I haven't got the data analysis to back that up. We've looked before at our turnover rates and retention levels, and of course we're now making adjustments, so we will need to in future measure that again and see if it has made that improvement.
Yeah, because of the cultural change in people's, everyday lives. Do you think we're winning on that, or are we losing more than we get in? And if we could have the figures, it'd be useful.
I can certainly bring those back for the next meeting. Part of the reason for the pay for availability system was when we think about attraction and retention of staff, we were seeing difficulties in the community. And as you quite rightly point out, a lot of these towns where we have on-call stations, we now see people working away from their home and their hometown. And that's been something with changing society over the years. So the approach that we're using with pay for availability is to seek to address that by giving flexibility in how many hours people need to give and actually rewarding them more highly for the time that they give. So we believe that is going to make an impact on how we attract and retain staff. But as I say, it's too early to measure that as yet. I can certainly come back with figures of where we are at the moment and that historical position over the last few years. But I think it's something we should continue to monitor in the future as we move across to pay for availability.
Thank you for that, Stephen. That's explained that to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Steve. Would you like to, Chair, did you want to come in or say anything on this section?
No, I'm absolutely satisfied and really pleased to see the development that's happening. I can see a cultural change happening, which is really good, and I'm so pleased to hear it's happening right across the organisation. Very, very good news.
Chair, David Thomas indicated he'd like to speak. I'm not sure if he still does.
Okay, just before I bring him in, Chair, I don't know, perhaps after the meeting we can have a sort of a bit of an email or phone discussion, because I do think following the committee we ought to do a bit of comms, perhaps with a press release with a small quote from both of you and I, sort of highlighting some of this good work, because I do still feel we're hiding a light under a bushel a bit about the work that we're doing, you know, which is quite extensive in trying to get more women in and be more inclusive. So maybe we can draft something up with our comms, Chair.
Oh, let's stay on the line at the end of the meeting.
Okay, all right, Chair. Thank you. Councillor Thomas, would you like to come in, please?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Very quick question was regarding the other fire and rescue services that had entered. You said we were 29. Just really wanted to know how we compared with the other three, please.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I've got a full report on that. In general, we came in on top of all these fire services, and but not in all areas. So there will be areas where we were just below. So they do a benchmark within the fire and rescue service sector, and in some areas we just came in below another fire service, so we might have ended up second, but overall we came in first.
Thank you very much indeed.
That's very good news. Thank you very much. Have you got anything else to add at the moment, please?
No, that's me for this.
So thank you very much. We might have to add a bit of comms highlights, but we'll do that again. Who is doing the next section?
Chair, through you, I'd like to give input on the next section, the ways of working. That's okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so just a quick reminder, first of all, about the format of this report. It relates to our people strategy. On each section, you'll see that we have a statement of our aspiration, and that's taken from the people strategy. We've then got the pin chart, which shows you the areas that we will focus on for that particular strategic theme. And what we've then done is highlighted some of the points and areas that we've been working on. So for the ways of working, we've had some discussions already around the pay for availability system, and this has been a key piece of work for us. It's involved consultation with staff, the trade unions, and quite a number of departments in terms of actually setting up what is a unique and a sector leading method of payment. And we're getting interest from other fire and rescue services who'd like to see what we're doing. Now, as we stand, we have a collective agreement with the FRSA. With the FBU, we're working towards reaching agreement. We did end up taking the matter to a national level with what's called the NJC, the National Joint Council. And so we had some support from an employer's side and an employee's side nationally. We didn't reach agreement nationally, but having exhausted that process, we've been able to come back locally and continue those discussions. So we are aiming still to reach a collective agreement with the FBU. And what that will do is simplify the rollout for us across the service. Now, we believe that the majority of our staff do want to have this new system, but what we've done is gone to stations that provide a varied profile across the service, and stations where at the moment they could tell us that 100% of the staff wanted to move across to this new system. And we've put a lot of time and effort into this with the meetings with staff and getting the system set up to enable us to make the payments in this way. That's all gone really well. The first 6 stations are online and working in this way now. We've got another 7 stations lined up in January, which will give us that 2-month period to ensure that we know the system is working correctly. And I say 2 months because the payment for availability is in arrears, not in advance. So that's a really piece of work, and we're really proud of what we've managed to achieve with that. In paragraph 4.4, we talk more generally about the whole time and the ways of working. And this is one of those areas that was paused when we entered the response stage of COVID-19. And at the moment, we haven't formally recommenced those discussions because what we do want to do is ensure we've got the pay for availability scheme sorted out first of all. Once we've done that, we will be progressing those discussions further with the FBU. The next paragraph, 4.5, is talking about the more flexible ways of working, smart working that we've introduced. As part of our people strategy, we wanted to become more flexible in the way we work, and that's really been accelerated through COVID-19. We do need to ensure that we've got adequate IT systems in place. We need to make sure that people do have the right equipment to work safely from home, and that we are supporting staff with regular contact with them to ensure that their physical and mental well-being is catered for. We've talked earlier about the hybrid or blended approach to working, and we are seeing some people who are coming into the workplace for part of the week in order to fulfill their roles, and that is expected to continue. What we now want to do is, rather than this being a response to COVID, is to make this a long-term and permanent arrangement that we are more flexible in the way that we work. And part of that is making sure, as I say, we've got new technologies in place. We're using WebEx today. We've got Facebook Workplace that we use, but the aim is to have Teams and have that with the Microsoft 365 platform. So that's work that's ongoing. We also need to look at how we operate with our performance and development discussions with staff. So what we call our PPDs. Some people in the past would have referred to these as appraisals, but what we're seeking is regular conversations with employees rather than that traditional annual appraisal approach. We've got an excellent system in place for this, and we are just now encouraging our staff to make more use of that. And it will feed more into our performance management as well, because it gives us the ability to record objectives through that process as well. So it is a really important area, and it now forms part of our recovery work as well. And you'll see more coming out of this as we move forward. So that was all I was going to say at this point.
Thank you, Steve. And just a sort of point of information, and I can't speak for the colleagues in Somerset, but certainly in Devon, we're looking at a blended approach where, for example, a big scrutiny meeting where we've got external witnesses and participants, you know, as soon as we can get back to normal, sometime hopefully next year. But we're also looking, as you've said, the sort of smart working. If it's an internal meeting, maybe a few participants scattered across the area, much more effective to do it this way. And I think it can be done well this way. So I think you're very much on trend with Devon, particularly, and other local authorities that I know. And as you said, it's not just a response to COVID. It's just more time efficient and a better way of working. Thank you. Are there any other members who'd like to come in on this section, please? Sam, have we got anybody who'd like to come in on this one?
I haven't seen anybody else indicate on this. I think we've lost David Thomas at the moment, but other than that, we're okay.
Chair.
Okay, right, thank you. Thanks to you.
Rob.
Yes.
Apologies, I didn't put it in the chat. Steve, you were just talking about trying to improve connectivity with all of our staff. Could I just ask a very basic question? Do all of our staff, irrespective of whether they're whole-time support or on call, have an email address which is Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue? Because I know at the moment members don't, and I'm finding this very frustrating that we don't have dedicated email addresses. Just wanting to make sure that every single member can be contacted on a Devon and Somerset one as opposed to their private email addresses.
Yes, Chair, I can confirm that is the case. Everyone does have an email account. We also have set up, in fact, connectivity via mobile phones as well. So we have a mobile number that if we have a very urgent matter that we want to put out to staff, we can do so as a text message. And we have done that a couple of times during this period of COVID. But yes, we do have that in place.
Because I believe there is a delay on the Teams delivery, because Teams should have, or Microsoft 365 should have already been delivered by now, and that has been delayed. I think I'm right in saying.
I think that's something I'd have to defer to EB colleagues on that. I know it's something that we're aiming to introduce, but I don't have the very latest information on that.
Something to do with Microsoft wanting more money, I think, which is, I find, outrageous behaviour, but never mind.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think that's something that Steve will get back to us about, but a very important point. So could we now move on, please, to learning and development?
Thank you, Chair. Michelle Sobey again. So Steve's already picked up what we're talking around the PPD system and the personal performance and development conversations that people have been having. And there was a bit of a decline because of COVID in those conversations being recorded. So quite often conversations are being had, but if they're not recorded on the system, we can't report on them. But that is now increasing. And also as part of our recovery phase and return to work, as Steve said earlier, that workplace return assessment conversation and health and wellbeing conversations for those who've remained in the workplace are important, and they're also recorded on the PPD system. So that's where people are talked to about their individual risk and how they want to work and how that works for them. So moving on to talking about coaching and resilience. So quite early on, and you'll see in the health and wellbeing section, we've talked about all the people impact assessment work we've done around COVID, thinking about what staff are going to need. We identified that resilience may be an issue because it's, even when we didn't know what was going to happen, we kind of knew in a global pandemic it was going to be difficult, particularly with people having to work very differently. It's quite a scary situation to be in. So we did some work with our internal coaches around resilience coaching so that we could support managers. So at that time, it wasn't really taken up because I think people were working so quickly and perhaps on adrenaline and caught up on the situation. But what we're seeing now is that kind of need is more there now as time goes on, and this is a protracted way of working. So we've supported our internal coaches with that extra resilience training, and we're also bringing in a coaching culture, which is a virtual coaching service, which is part of our people development project, and that has lots of different functionality. One of them is to support managers, obviously, but also it provides a 360 feedback capability which supports development, and that is being implemented at the moment as part of that project. I've already talked about the significant impact on our Watch Manager Leadership Development Programme due to COVID. There were lots of face-to-face sessions planned and they obviously had to stop, but the team have been really creative in putting learning together in virtual environments. We've got internal subject matter experts who deliver sessions to our watch managers, and now we're moving into our recovery phase where we can do some face-to-face. They're obviously COVID safe and in line with what we can actually do. I've already talked about the development programs that are being developed, but this is where at the moment it's being developed within a project environment. So we need to do some work around what our long-term learning development delivery vehicle for leadership and management development will look like. We want to kind of make sure we've got a best practice talent management service across the piece. But that's something I guess we'll probably talk to you about next time when that's further developed. It's still in the project environment at the moment. So at the moment, in terms of the leadership, the learning and development section, that's the full update. I can go on to talk about the health and safety and wellbeing if there are, unless we have any questions.
One sort of question I've got for you in terms of the learning and development, the pin diagram, the purple one. If, for example, somebody is in a watch and they don't find that watch culture particularly supportive, or there are issues there, is the learning and development and training sort of people focused? It doesn't have to necessarily go through a watch commander who might be passive aggressive and blocking because of sort of on station office politics.
Sorry, I don't know if I quite understand the question. So, can you explain again?
On a station and finding the sort of team spirit there, shall I say, and you know, to improve and develop myself. Is that training and development model individually focused on me? It doesn't have to get signed off but through a hierarchy on that station where there might be another agenda of, you know, being or not wanting that person to develop.
I see what you mean. Yeah, no, any learning and development that we put together is organisational, so there isn't any way that anyone can interject with how people are developed within the organisation. That's an organisational approach that's taken throughout, so it's not subject to localisms, etc. It's an organisational approach, if that answers your question.
I'm just thinking there's lots of examples through public and private sector where you'd have to get things signed off by a line manager or through a structure, or there'd have to be a development plan. But the way you've said it is much better, and that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so there will be a development plan, but that wouldn't be subject to someone being able to block that. And as I talked about the talent pools earlier, that talent pool framework will mean that people will be able to apply to be a part of that, and that will be we'll make sure that is equal access for all. It's based on potential and not able to be blocked, essentially.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle at this point? Sam?
I haven't seen anybody else indicating, Chair.
Okay, Michelle, did you want to finish off with health and safety and wellbeing, please?
Yes, I will. So we've already talked already, and you can see in the report we've listed a lot of the stuff that we've done throughout COVID. As Joe said, a lot of the development work we wanted to do around the people strategy did have to stop. However, we've found lots of ways and lots of opportunities throughout this to push those aspirations and the people strategy through our way of working. So we've been constantly talking to our staff, asking them how they're feeling, doing people impact assessments, which is where we put in place and project into the future what we think might happen, and putting stuff in place around that. There's been a COVID-19 staff survey that Comms and Engagement did fairly recently, and that's also developed a further action plan. We did a lot of work, a lot of information on our intranet around remote working and looking after our staff when they work remotely, and a lot of guidance for managers. And that was quite early on, actually, and that included ways that managers can bring teams together virtually. I think that's been, and speaking as a manager, I think that's been one of the hardest things to do throughout this phase, is actually getting teams together and doing some collaborative working has been much more difficult, actually, through virtual working. So that's why, as Steve was talking about, when we're putting together a smart working approach, so a blended approach going forward, we sent out risk assessments and impact assessments and asked teams how they felt about how they were working, how they would like to work in the future. And as you alluded to, Chair, lots of people really did enjoy the family-friendly approach of flexible working, but they want a balance. They want to be able to come in and see their colleagues and work collaboratively. And that's the approach that we're taking with the smart working vision around that. The fitness testing, I'll defer to Steve if anyone wanted to have an update around that.
your names, please.
Are you able to pick that up, please?
Okay, just coming back in then. So we've certainly had some challenges around the actual testing of current firefighters and also new recruits during COVID. And what we had done last year, we had introduced an annual fitness assessment, but also then the 3-yearly medical, which incorporates a fitness test as well. And using a people impact assessment, what we had determined was that we would like to have a number of ways in which we can test people for their fitness. And in seeking to introduce those, we were anticipating that this year we'd be able to give a wider range. But with COVID, it's meant that we have had to limit the options that we have. But what we've been able to do is to make use of what's commonly called a bleep test. And in addition to that, we've used a run test with a 1.5 mile timed run. And that's what we're working through September and October. The 3-yearly medicals, we had to stop at the start of COVID. And we've since been able to put the risk assessments in place and recommence that work. And so that's now ongoing. There has been a little bit of catch up and the same from a recruitment point of view, because as part of the recruitment of external recruits, we will undertake practicals and some fitness testing. And that fitness testing also applies to the on-call to hold time that I referred to earlier. And for that, we now require them to do the fitness test and also a swim safe test as well. So yeah, that work is continuing. We recognise it was a concern raised by the HMIC, and we will expect to be reporting back to them as they return to the service. Are there any questions around that element?
Thank you, Steve. And I think we, obviously we do understand that, the slippage that was inevitable from the pandemic, and as and again, sadly, as things progress, unfortunately, we might have to bear a bit more slippage should things obviously worsen. Sam, do we have anyone who would like to come in on at this point, please?
Yes, Ron Peart, please, Chair.
Right.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you through you, Chair, to Steve. The mental health awareness and support, what level of detail do you hold on the people who work for us? So let's say somebody's single, living in a flat with no actual contact with people that much. Do we know that?
I can comment on this. I'm certainly happy for Michelle to come back in as well, because this was a really good piece of work that OD led on with support from HR as well, around having those conversations with staff about their circumstances and how COVID was affecting them, and then considering as we talked about earlier, their COVID age. So we have had those kind of discussions about whether people have family members who may be shielding or affected as well, or whether they are comfortable in their own home when they're working. So we've done a lot on that, and I mentioned earlier about the physical as well as the mental side. And one of our concerns has been people started working from home and were able to take some of their IT equipment home with them, and possibly in some cases their chair. But we recognise that isn't always a very comfortable way of working, and there is the ability for staff to now to buy additional equipment to use at home, whether that's a table or a chair or lighting, so that they can ensure that they are comfortable at home. And there's actually some tax arrangements that are supporting that in this financial year. So going back to your question, people living individually, their line manager should be aware of how they are and how they're coping during this time. And I know we all have regular one-to-ones with our staff members, and it is a chance to consider that well-being aspect as well as how they're getting on in the job. I've probably said most of it, but Michelle, you may have some more to add in there.
Can I add to that? Yeah, so I mentioned briefly those workplace return assessments, which kind of sounds incredibly cold, but actually they're very people-focused set of questions that are mandatory, that managers are going through with staff to make sure, just as you're saying, what people's personal circumstances are, and is there anything that is causing them any concern or stress at this time. And I think one of the things that this situation has brought to bear is we've actually all got to know each other better as humans and people, rather than just people who work for Devon and Somerset. And I think that's been to our benefit, actually. So I think because of that, you know, it's there aren't any benefits to a global pandemic, obviously, but we've got to take what we can, and it has made us more aware of who our staff are, what their personal circumstances are, and made us more keenly aware of how we need to support them going forward.
I'd like to congratulate you then on the work that you're doing on the health and safety and well-being. It's obviously a complex setup, but you're covering nearly everything you could possibly think of. But there's always other things that could arise. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I'd just like to ask both of you as well, in your sort of overview. Clearly, you know, we went through the first phase of the pandemic. We had the big lockdown. And people talk about long COVID in terms of having had it and then the symptoms. In terms of mental health and well-being, I'm detecting from certainly my area and some of the people I'm dealing with individually at the moment, that now the prospect of going into the winter period, potential local, if not a national lockdown again, a sort of here we go again feeling, you know, the lack of sporting opportunities, the lack of social opportunities overall, and that's almost been harder than the first stage because there was a perceived end to it, where at the moment it seems open-ended. How do you think that's going to sort of pan out for some of our staff in terms of the sort of here we go again, open-ended sort of dimension to the pandemic?
Do you want me to answer that? So yeah, to answer that, I mean, there are quite a few plans we've got in place around mental health campaigns, aren't there, Steve, about pushing stuff out there to support staff. But also, I think, if you think about Chris Elliott when he was talking about his health and safety report at the start, it is a bit different this time because we had to stop doing everything. So we went into business continuity. So staff who work as I do, we weren't able to do the same kind of work. But now we are able to, through working more resiliently and differently, we have got a bit more of a sense of normality in terms of work now. So we're hoping to keep that going. So we're not saying to staff, for example, stay at home and you know, you can't do any of your work. We're looking at what actually, because the guidance now is around, you know, what can you do if it's essential to do at work? And there are some things essentially that OD need to do with people in the workplace. And we've got safe workplaces and we've got safe working protocols and we adhere to that. So it's making sure that it's not really going back to how it was before, but it's kind of supporting people to keep that sense of we're moving forward, but always obviously with an eye to what's happening, if that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Yes, it does. Thank you. Joe, did you want to deal with the conclusion part of the report, please? Sort of sum up, maybe?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. I think just that final bit around that Michelle was going to talk about around, and I know bullying and harassment was something that we were really disappointed to find in our HMI report and in subsequent staff surveys. So Michelle and her team are putting together a really comprehensive project that will go top to bottom in the organisation, and it's around developing trust. So just before we conclude, if that, I wouldn't mind Michelle just giving you a quick briefing on that, and then I'll wrap up if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you. Michelle, do you want to come back in, please?
Yeah, if I give you a quick overview, but it would be, I don't know if it's my place to offer, but it'd be quite a good topic for a forum perhaps going forward, because it is very wide reaching and I won't be able to cover it all here. So this is a piece of work that has come about looking through the people strategy. There are several different areas and different cultures that we want to bring together. We want a learning culture, we want a performance-led culture, and we want to make sure our behaviours are right. And the main kind of push for OD was around what are the cultural conditions we need to enable this people strategy to happen. And what we've done through analysis and looking at what happens in other organisations and research is identified that it is psychological safety, as I said before, which is people being treated, having respect and permission, essentially. So feeling safe to learn, so to admit mistakes and say how have we, you know, how has that happened? How can we put it better? Feeling safe to contribute, to put forward their ideas and ways of working, and also safe to challenge where they think things aren't right. And that doesn't that respect is nothing to do with hierarchy. So it's about challenging upwards, downwards, across, and wherever. So what we're putting together, as Joe said, is a comprehensive programme, and we've been incredibly lucky to recruit Will Batho as an OD practitioner, and he's got a background. He was a helicopter pilot, and some of you might know that in aviation, a just culture, as it's called, is the way they work. So that means although there is a hierarchy, there is that absolute acceptance that human error happens, and that's the way, you know, that's the way it is, and we have to talk about that. Anyone needs to be able to talk about that. So he has got lots of ideas himself. We have identified that we can apply this approach across to all behaviours. So it's not just around health and safety as they use in aviation. It also applies to other behavioural aspects like bullying and harassment, for example. If you feel safe to speak up and challenge others on it, then that's going to improve the culture. So there's an awful lot to it. I would like the opportunity to perhaps talk about it more in another kind of forum. But we're just at the start of that. That work's already started. So, for example, when we've done a strategic debrief around our response phase, that had a very heavy kind of people aspect to looking at the way people have been led and managed throughout that phase too. So it's making sure that we are self-aware, we're really looking and reflecting at ourselves and making sure that we're allowing that culture to flourish.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, I'm certainly defer obviously to the chair if gets taken to the forum, but maybe another route would be for you to actually give us an agenda item at some future point to this meeting as well, so that we can understand it. I think that would be useful. It's, as you said, it's quite a profound sort of piece of work, isn't it? It goes right the way through the whole organisation. So I think you know, what we can do to understand it would be important. Okay, thank you. Joe, did you want to come back in now just to wrap this item up, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to thank everybody involved. Certainly Michelle, Steve and Audrey have done a huge amount of work, and Chris from a health and safety perspective over the last 6 months. They've absolutely put themselves out there and been exemplary. So I just wanted to thank them for the work that they've done from this. I'd also just like to just to go back then, that this was just to conclude, this is just the focusing on the update on the people strategy. There's been some challenges, but there's also been some opportunities that we've managed to use through this pandemic. This work's not going to stop, so it's going to continue. We'll give you further updates at future committees, and Sam's got a hand up, so I'll just defer to her for a moment.
Thank you, Joe.
Chair, sorry, if we are reaching the conclusion of this paper, I know that Joe did say that we didn't need a vote, but on reflection, I feel we probably do. So if you are ready, if I could ask for a proposer and a seconder before we move to a vote, please.
Happy to propose.
Happy to second.
Have you got those?
Yes, Chair, if everybody could switch on their videos to move to the vote on recommendation A. That's carried, Chair, unanimously. Thank you. Did you catch that, Rob?
Strategy lies. Can we now move on to agenda item 6, which is the request for retirement and reappointment? And just committee.
Chair, your sound went temporarily then, but I think that either Joe or Steve might be taking this one.
Yes,
Thanks. Happy to defer to Steve. Sorry about some connection problems. So I'm happy for Steve. This is supported by Amy's just put in the inside chat bar that's in her directorate. She's fully supportive of it, but I'll happily hand over to Steve just to present this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And Amy, if you do want to come in, please do. This is a regular report that we bring to this committee as we receive requests for retirement and re-employment. It is a requirement that we get approval from the HMD committee because that fits with our pay policy statement, which is covered under the Localism Act. So the paper contains the background of the principles around that. We've covered it, I think, several times in the past, more often for uniform staff than for support staff. And this particular case, it is a support staff member from within our procurement team. And in paragraph 2.2 and 2.3, just set out the background to the decision. I know EB have considered this particular individual circumstances and are happy to support it. And it is now just a matter of making sure that that is also approved through the HMD committee. So I'll hand back to the chair or to Amy if she wishes to add any further comment.
Amy, are you still with us?
Chair, Amy has had to leave the meeting to go to another meeting, but as Joe indicated, she did indicate in the chat function before she left that she was happy to support the request.
Thank you.
Chair, are we able to, if there aren't any questions, I can't see anybody indicating, if we could have a proposer and a seconder.
Chair, sorry, I don't know if you've had acceptance from the chair. Indicate seconding.
Rob, I can't hear you very well, apologies.
Is that better, Sam?
That's better, yeah. Did you propose that from the chair, Rob?
Indicated you seconded.
I've lost you.
So I think we can go to front now.
So Rob moved that from the chair. Did Rob second it? And David?
I have a question.
Ron's got a question. Apologies.
Can I go ahead, Sam?
Yes.
Right, through you, Chair. In principle, this looks fine, but how many hours does each staff member work a week normally?
So if I can come in, please, then, Chair. The normal hours for a full-time person in support staff would be 37 hours per week. This person has requested to come back on a part-time basis at 18 hours per week. And we've talked about the other arrangements that we have around another team member returning from maternity, which is why it fits in with that.
Yeah, see, my only concern, because I see procurement now as being an important, even more important, because of Brexit, and even if we leave without a deal. So my concern is that with the backup, Phil, are we still short of hours, considering there's only about 23 hours being put in by the two officers that you have requested to do less hours. I mean, as long as we've got enough cover, because it's for me, that's my concern. I see this as an important role in procurement, and I don't want to see us having less cover.
Yeah, I can entirely understand that, Ron. And I think the intent behind this is that we retain a skilled category manager who's worked for us for many years, and it gives us time to seek to recruit additional staff to ensure that we do have sufficient resources, but at the same time retain somebody. And as the paper says, this individual can retire at any point, and if we're not able to make this offer, they will leave us. So I think the intent is to retain that skills base as best we can, albeit as a 0.5 FTE.
So because he's on a 1 year contract, is that a stopgap for us to be looking other than the backfill? Are we looking for more than one?
I don't actually know that, Ron. It's for the department to say. They will have a set staffing budget, which would include these two positions as full FTEs. Now, when I read the proposal, clearly it's one member of staff dropping down to 0.5, another member of staff returning on 0.5, which will leave another vacancy. And I suspect they will want to backfill that, and that will happen in due course. But it's for the department to really determine what they do with that. As I said just now, the budget for each department is set around those FTEs and the costs, so they will have the ability within their existing budget to replace that one FTE.
Yeah, and just if I could just follow on, just a couple more questions through you, Chair. It's regarding the procurement resource plan. I think that'd be useful if we could have a look at that, maybe members, to see what it entails. And another question following on from that is, how reliant are we on buying from Europe? Are we 100% reliant, or are we looking to source equipment from the UK?
So,
Chair, may I come in?
Yes. I mean, what I would say just before you do, Sam, is I think with respect, Ron, they're very good questions and that we should be thinking about, but I think they're not necessarily within the remit of this committee, although it's very difficult to unlink them because I'm talking about the capacity of that member of staff and the effect on the department. I'm not sure those points and topics are something that relate to the Human Resources Committee. Sam, did you want to say something?
Chair, yes, I'm thinking perhaps we can actually provide that information to Councillor Peart outside of the committee meeting, and we'd be happy to do so.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm just concerned that we're covered, and we're in a position that we're not struggling in that department on procurement. I'm quite happy other than that.
Yes. I'm just saying that, Ron, I think some of the bigger issues about where we're getting supplies from are probably not within the remit. They probably lie somewhere else.
Yeah, I accept that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Steve, did you want to answer any of those points?
No, I can't really. The confirmation about the staffing levels within procurement, we can come back to you on if there's a concern there. And the other questions around the procurement resource plan and the impact of Brexit, they're really for Amy and that team to respond on. Yes. I'm here today presenting it from a point of view of retirement re-employment, our pay policy statement, and the need to have the support from HRMD colleagues.
Yes, I get that. They are safe points, but they're not within your bailiwick as we speak, are they? So I think we understand that. Members, we do have a proposal and a seconder. So if you are content on the basis that we've been given some reassurances today to support this, can you indicate, please?
4. David? 5. That's carried unanimously, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that. So if we can now move on to agenda item 7, which is the consultation of government exit payments, please.
Okay, through you, Chair, I think I'm picking this one up as well.
Sorry, Steve. It's got Joe's name at the bottom, but do carry on.
Okay, happy to defer to Joe if he prefers to take this, but otherwise I can add to it.
You lead on. That's fine.
Okay, the sector, the public sector exit payments regs have been laid before government, and I can actually give a further update from this paper, which they've now completed the affirmative process and will come into force from the 4th of November. So that's happening anyway. But what this paper is about is a response to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government in relation to what the impact will be upon redundancy payments and the local government pension scheme. So this, for us as an organisation, is something that will only ever affect our support staff, control staff, and those members of EB who are non-operational. So that's the areas of staff. I had intended for the government consultation document to come out to you as well, and my apologies that it didn't, but it contains some further background that I'd captured in the paper anyway. And then the questions that were asked in terms of that consultation. Now, in terms of the redundancy calculation, over the years, we've reduced down the enhanced payment that we have. And when we first combined Devon and Somerset, we were applying a multiplier of 2.5 on top of the statutory redundancy rate, and actually using the actual weekly rate of pay. Now, we've had meetings throughout the last few years, and we reviewed that multiplier and eventually brought it down to 1, which means there isn't any further enhanced multiplier there. Whereas this paper talks about what we could have done is had a maximum of up to 104 weeks that could be paid for a redundancy. We don't have that in this organisation, and our absolute maximum is 30 weeks. We do apply the rate of pay that somebody has if it's more than the statutory level, and that's the only difference that we have. In terms of the pension, there is currently an aspect where we are required to pay a strain payment if somebody leaves the service and it's as a result of a service-driven decision, such as a redundancy situation. And what the new exit pay regulations do is limit the amount that can be applied for that strain payment and statutory redundancy. So that's what needs to be enacted in the pension arrangements following the government's change in the overarching legislation around this. And that's what we're expecting to happen once this consultation has been finished. But government have asked for our views on it, and this paper gives responses to that. I don't really see that there are too many options, because it's an overarching statutory regulation, and any of the public sector pension schemes are going to have to fall in line with that. So I think it's quite a straightforward thing, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You've obviously mentioned the consultation period. Can you just confirm what sort of nominal timeline we're looking at potentially with this?
Yeah, so we need to, if we're going to make a submission, then it needs to be by the 9th of November, which is the end of the consultation period.
Thank you, Steve. Sam, do we have any questions for Steve on the report, please? Yes. Councillor Wheeler, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's in a way, it's not really about the report. But, I'm quite happy with the response. I think it covers points. What I was concerned about was the scope of the report, and when I read the agenda item report, I wondered about why it's only concerned with the local government pension scheme, but I read the start of the consultation document this morning, and it does make it clear that it only wants comments on the local government pension scheme. Are we being asked to comment on well, for instance, in fact, the one that's applicable to us, the firefighters' pension scheme, because that has equally significant repercussions for us?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we haven't seen a formal consultation around that. But the distinction is with the firefighter pension schemes, they don't have the same arrangements concerning a strain payment. Now, the local government scheme is a fully financed scheme, whereas the firefighter pension is based purely on contributions made and therefore the benefits arising. The only time that we would ever be in a position where we would pay an equivalent of a strain payment is if, say, for example, a firefighter in the 92 scheme had more than 25 years service, which made them eligible to retire, and we did a service initiated retirement, which we've never done before. And if we did, it isn't a strain paying calculation, but you just end up making up the difference in what those pension costs would be for that individual. It's an incredibly expensive thing to do, and we've never attempted to take that option in the past. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Does that answer your point, George?
Yeah, yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. So, George, if you're happy with it, would you be happy to the? Oh, sorry, Sam, you wanted to come in.
David Thomas would like to ask a question.
Okay. Just sorry, while I've got you on this subject, before we bring David in, George, if you're happy with the recommendations and the submissions, would you like to move those, please?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to move in due course. Yes.
Thank you, George. David, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Basically, it was just a comment, really. I'll start off by saying I'm happy to second George, no problem at all. Clearly, capping the exit payments will, potentially cause us some flexibility issues, potentially moving forward. But I think the answers in response to the consultation are about as fair as we could expect. So based on the paper that's in front of us, I have no problem in seconding that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sam. Do any other members want to come in? No? Okay, so it's been and seconded by Councillor Thomas. So all those in favour of the submissions, please? 3, 4, 5. That is 5-4, so it's carried unanimously, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, members, for that outcome. We'll get our representations in time. I think that brings the committee to a conclusion today. I'd like to thank everybody here today. It's some time since we've had a committee meeting because of obviously the pandemic and various dates changing. I think we've had a very positive meeting today. And we may not be called a scrutiny committee, but we've certainly provided, I think, today some robust scrutiny and certainly asked for further information. So I certainly think as I said, we might not officially be a scrutiny, but we're certainly scrutinising, which I think is very important. So I'd like to thank you all today and the officers for their contributions. And Sarah, we'll have a catch up about perhaps getting some comms out about our good work in the community. So thank you, members. Keep safe and
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Well done, Rob.